The dust of the Kansas plains was a familiar taste in my mouth, a bittersweet reminder of a life I'd always known, yet one that was now being pulled out from under me. My father, a man of few words and calloused hands, had passed away 3 weeks ago, and today was the day the will was to be read. I sat in the old farmhouse living room, the scent of lemon polish and aged wood heavy in the air, a stark contrast to the tension that filled the room. My older brother Mark sat across from me, his face a mask of smug satisfaction, and my sister Susan fidgeted with her purse, her eyes darting between us. We were a family in name only, a fractured trio held together by the ghost of a man who had built this farm from nothing. The lawyer, Mr. Thompson, a frail man with a voice that crackled like dry leaves, cleared his throat. "As per the last will and testament of Arthur Miller," he began, his words cutting through the silence. He spoke of the land, the equipment, the finances, all divided equally between Mark and Susan. I sat there, my stomach a cold knot, waiting for my name, but it never came. The lawyer finished, a grave look on his face as he looked at me. My siblings exchanged triumphant glances. Mark spoke first, his voice dripping with condescension. "Tough luck, little brother. Guess Dad didn't think you were worth a dime." The words hit me like a physical blow, a confirmation of a lifelong feeling of being overlooked and undervalued. They didn't see the years I'd spent toiling alongside my father, learning every inch of this land. They didn't see the love I had for this farm, a love they'd never shared. As they started talking about their plans to sell off the farm, a small, knowing smile touched my lips. They had their half of the land, sure, but they were forgetting one crucial detail. A detail my father, in his quiet way, had ensured would be my salvation. A detail that would change everything. If you're enjoying this story, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Your support helps us create more content like this. The day after the will reading was a blur of angry words and slammed doors. Mark and Susan were already making plans to sell the land, talking to real estate agents and valuing the equipment. They moved through the house like strangers, their laughter echoing through the halls, a stark reminder of their victory. I kept to myself, walking the fields, the dry dirt crumbling beneath my worn boots. I needed to think, to plan. I had a small slip of paper in my pocket, a note my father had given me a month before he passed. It was a deed, a simple transfer of ownership for a 10-acre plot on the north side of the farm, the Golden Pasture, as my father called it, the pasture where the best alfalfa grew, where the soil was the richest. The land they had inherited was good, but this small corner of it was, in my father's own words, the beating heart of the farm. The paper felt like a lifeline, a secret weapon in a war I hadn't known I was fighting. I watched from a distance as Mark and Susan celebrated, their smiles wide, their plans grand. They were so focused on the big picture, the entire farm, they hadn't paid attention to the smaller details. They didn't know that the very land they planned to sell was now mine. My hands trembled as I clutched the deed, the reality of the situation settling in. It wasn't about revenge. It was about respect. It was about honoring my father's quiet faith in me. I knew they would be furious, but for the first time in my life I wasn't scared of their anger. I had something they wanted, something they needed, and I wasn't going to give it up without a fight. The confrontation happened 2 days later, under the relentless Kansas sun. Mark and Susan had brought a potential buyer to the farm, a slick-haired man in an expensive suit. They were showing him around, pointing out the fields and the barn when they approached the Golden Pasture. "This is the best part of the land," Mark said, puffing out his chest. "We get the highest yield of alfalfa here." The buyer nodded, impressed. I walked up to them, my boots kicking up a small cloud of dust. "Excuse me," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "I think there's been a mistake." Mark turned to me, his face a storm of irritation. "What do you want, little brother? Can't you see we're busy?" I pulled the deed from my pocket and unfolded it carefully. "This land," I said, pointing to the Golden Pasture, "it's not yours, it's mine." The silence that followed was deafening. Susan's jaw dropped. The buyer looked at me, then at Mark, a look of confusion on his face. Mark snatched the paper from my hand, his eyes scanning the document. His face went from disbelief to rage in a matter of seconds. "This is a fake! Dad would never do this," he roared, his voice shaking. "It's a legally binding deed," I said, my voice gaining strength. "He signed it a month before he passed. It's a gift." Mark crumpled the paper in his fist, his face crimson. "You'll never get away with this," he spat, his words full of venom. But I had, and I had the proof to back it up. The buyer, sensing the tension, excused himself and left. As Mark and Susan stood there, their dreams of a quick sale crumbling around them, I finally felt seen. My father had left me more than just land. He had left me a chance to prove my worth. The next few weeks were a battleground. Mark and Susan hired lawyers, threatening me with lawsuits, claiming the deed was a fraud. They accused me of manipulating our father, of taking advantage of his age. Their words were like arrows, but I had a shield forged from my father's faith. I had the legal documents, and Mr. Thompson, the family lawyer, confirmed the authenticity of the deed. He explained that my father had carefully planned this, a quiet act of justice for the son he believed in. Mark and Susan were shocked, their anger now mixed with a bitter helplessness. They couldn't sell the farm without my land. The Golden Pasture was the heart of the operation. Without it, the rest of the land lost a significant portion of its value. They were trapped, forced to deal with me, the brother they had so easily cast aside. The irony wasn't lost on me. The two of them, who had always looked down on me, now needed me. One evening, Mark came to my house, a tense and uncomfortable silence between us. He had an offer. He wanted to buy my land. "We'll give you a fair price," he said, his voice tight. "A good price. Enough for you to start your own life somewhere else." I looked at him, at the desperation in his eyes, and a wave of sadness washed over me. It wasn't about the money. It had never been about the money. "The Golden Pasture isn't for sale, Mark," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "This is my home. This is where I belong." He left, defeated, the weight of his own greed finally settling on his shoulders. The land was mine, and I was going to keep it. I was going to honor my father and prove to my family and to myself that I was worthy. If you're enjoying this story, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Your support helps us create more content like this. With the legal battles finally simmering down, a profound quiet settled over the land, a stark and welcome contrast to the recent storm of accusations. This new stillness allowed me to truly breathe, to feel the sun on my face not as a threat, but as a source of warmth. I walked through the Golden Pasture, the tall green stalks of alfalfa rustling like whispered secrets in the breeze. Each blade was a testament to the rich soil my father had nurtured and his quiet, unwavering wisdom. This wasn't just a plot of land. It was my inheritance, my legacy, my burden of responsibility. I knew I couldn't run the entire farm alone, but I could transform these 10 acres into a beacon of success. I started small, pouring every cent of my meager savings into the highest quality alfalfa seeds I could find, and investing in a new, more efficient irrigation system. The work was grueling, a relentless cycle of tilling, planting, and watering under the unforgiving sun, but it was a labor of love. With every blister and every drop of sweat, I felt a deep, renewed connection to the land, a bond that went beyond mere ownership. It was a bond of respect, of shared history, of a future I was building with my own 2 hands. My days were spent toiling in the fields, my hands caked with dirt, while my nights were a different kind of labor. I'd pore over farming journals and agricultural websites, learning about new techniques, soil science and strategic planting. I wasn't just a farmer, I was a student, learning the very language of the land. My old friend Sarah, who ran the local diner, a place filled with the familiar smells of coffee and small-town gossip, noticed the change in me. "You look different, John," she said one morning, her voice soft and observant as she poured my coffee. "You look happy." Her words caught me by surprise. It wasn't something I had articulated, but she was right. I smiled, a genuine, wide smile that reached deep into my tired eyes. "I am, Sarah. For the first time in a long time, I am." My newfound peace was a stark, almost poetic contrast to the chaos brewing next door. Mark and Susan, trapped with a sprawling farm they couldn't sell, were locked in a constant, bitter battle. Their angry voices, filled with recriminations about money and blame, often carried across the open fields. a haunting soundtrack to my days. Their shared inheritance, once a symbol of their victory, had become a gilded prison. Their greed had backfired spectacularly, and they were now paying the price. I didn't gloat. I didn't take joy in their misery. I simply focused on my own land, my own future, a quiet testament to the fact that my father had given me a fresh start, and I wasn't going to waste it. The first harvest from the Golden Pasture was a resounding success, a triumph that tasted sweeter than any victory I could have imagined. The alfalfa grew in thick, vibrant stands, its quality so exceptional that I managed to secure a contract with a local feed store almost immediately. The contract wasn't just a business deal, it was a lifeline, a steady income that ensured my work wouldn't be in vain. The money wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to sustain me, and more importantly, to reinvest in the land. The physical labor was grueling, the days long and unforgiving, but I felt a deep, almost spiritual sense of accomplishment. Every drop of sweat was a testament to my hard work, a tangible tribute to my father's legacy. I was no longer the overlooked little brother, the quiet boy who lived in his siblings' shadow. I was a farmer, a landowner, a man who had built something real and tangible for himself. My evenings became a ritual of self-improvement. The local library became my second home, not just for farming manuals but for books on business, economics and marketing. I was teaching myself about profit margins, market trends, and the art of networking. I was no longer just tending a field, I was transforming a small plot of land into a viable modern business. One evening, as I was leaving the library, a man named Tom, a veteran farmer from the next town over, approached me. He was a man with a face like a roadmap of the Kansas plains, weathered and wise. "Heard about what you're doing, son," he said, his voice a gruff rumble that held a surprising kindness. "You're a hard worker. Your father would be proud." His words were a balm to my soul, an external validation of the internal growth I was experiencing. I knew Mark and Susan were watching. Their resentment was a palpable force, a silent weight in the air between our two properties. They saw my success, my growing reputation in the community, and it infuriated them. They had a vast amount of land, an entire farm, but it was nothing without its heart. They were living on a dying farm, a symbol of their own short-sightedness and greed. Their inheritance had become a curse, a constant and painful reminder of what they had lost and what I had gained. I didn't wish them ill, but I couldn't deny the poetic justice of the situation. My father had taught me a fundamental truth. A man's worth isn't measured in acres, but in the integrity of his work. And with every bale of hay I sold, with every successful harvest, I was proving that point, one crop at a time. The following year brought a new challenge, one that no amount of hard work or planning could have fully prepared me for: a devastating drought. The Kansas sun was a relentless tyrant, baking the earth into a cracked, barren landscape. The heat shimmered on the horizon, a ghostly mirage of water that wasn't there. Mark and Susan's fields, already neglected and poorly managed, withered and died. The lack of rain was the death blow to their dreams of an easy fortune, and their constant bickering escalated into full-blown shouting matches that I could hear from my property line, carried on the hot, dry wind. I watched them from a distance, their figures silhouetted against the unforgiving sun, a sense of pity stirring within me. I was lucky. My father, in his quiet wisdom, had taught me the vital importance of a good water source. The Golden Pasture had its own well, a deep, reliable source he had invested in years ago, a testament to his foresight and his belief in a sustainable future. It was another one of his silent gifts, a lifeline in a time of crisis. I worked tirelessly, rationing the water, ensuring my alfalfa field stayed a vibrant, healthy green in a sea of brown. It was a lonely, difficult time, but the feeling of purpose, of knowing I was honoring my father's vision, kept me going. One afternoon I saw Sarah, my friend from the diner, driving toward my farm. She got out of her truck, her face creased with concern, the worry in her eyes a reflection of the town's collective anxiety. "John, I know you're busy, but I wanted to check on you," she said, her voice soft and genuinely worried. "Everyone in town is worried about the drought." I smiled, a tired but genuine smile that barely reached my sun-bleached hair. "I'm okay, Sarah. I'm managing. I've got the well." She looked at me, a mixture of admiration and relief in her eyes. "Your father was a smart man, John," she said. "He knew what he was doing." Her words, simple as they were, meant the world to me. She was right. My father had given me the tools to survive, to thrive even in the harshest conditions. And as I looked out over my green, flourishing pasture, a small island of life in a barren land, I knew that his legacy was not in the acres of land he left behind, but in the wisdom and resilience he had instilled in me. If you're enjoying this story, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Your support helps us create more content like this. The drought, while devastating for many in the region, was a turning point for me. My alfalfa was the only crop thriving for miles, a vibrant patch of green that stood out against the cracked beige landscape. Soon, local farmers started approaching me. They were desperate for feed for their starving livestock, and I was their only option. I didn't exploit their desperation. I offered them fair, honest prices, and in return, I gained not just their business, but their deep respect and loyalty. The community, once a distant group of faces, now felt like a family, a network of support built on trust and mutual respect. I was no longer the outsider. I was John Miller, a trusted farmer, a man they could rely on. The money started coming in, more than I had ever imagined, a tangible reward for my hard work and integrity. I was able to hire help, 2 hard-working teenagers from town who were eager to learn, and I bought new, more efficient equipment that made the work easier and more productive. I wasn't just surviving, I was building a successful business, one that was built on hard work, honesty, and the quiet, enduring wisdom of my father. I saw Mark and Susan less and less. They had become shadows, isolated in their dilapidated farmhouse, their pride a fragile shield against the world. They had a vast, worthless piece of land, a monument to their own greed. The house was falling into disrepair, the barn was a crumbling ruin, and their fields were a desolate, barren wasteland. They were trapped by their own choices, and their lives were a stark contrast to the life I was building. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and purple, casting long shadows across the land, I saw Mark sitting on the porch, his head in his hands. He looked old, defeated, a man weighed down by regret. I felt a pang of something akin to sorrow. He was my brother, after all, but the rift between us was too wide now, the years of neglect and the final betrayal too deep to bridge. My success wasn't a punishment for them. It was a result of my own choices, my own hard work. I was a man standing on his own 2 feet, not because I was a better person, but because I had been given a chance to prove it. My father had given me that chance, and I was going to honor it not just for myself, but for him. The drought finally broke with a series of powerful thunderstorms that rolled in from the west, washing the dust from the air and bringing a fresh, clean scent of rain to the parched earth. The land, once barren and cracked, began to show signs of life again. For Mark and Susan, it was a momentary flicker of hope, a chance to start over. But for me, it was a confirmation of the solid foundation I had built. My business was flourishing, my reputation in the community was strong, and my network of connections was solid. The Golden Pasture was no longer just a 10-acre plot. It was a symbol of resilience, of a man's ability to overcome adversity and build a future against all odds. One day, a call came in from a large agricultural company in the city. They had heard about my success, about the exceptional quality of my alfalfa, and they wanted to offer me a contract, a big contract, a life-changing contract. The deal would not only secure my financial future for years to come, but also allow me to expand my operations, to buy more land and to hire more people. As I hung up the phone, a surge of triumph and pride coursed through me, a feeling that went far beyond money. It was the feeling of being seen, of being valued, of success earned through my own effort, and the quiet guidance of my father. I knew that my father, wherever he was, would be proud. I thought about Mark and Susan, about their silent, empty farmhouse. They had inherited the family name, the family farm, but they had lost the family's heart. They had all the land in the world, but I had the Golden Pasture, the 10 acres that were worth more than all of their land combined. My father had given me more than a field of alfalfa. He had given me a reason to fight, a reason to believe in myself, and the tools to build a life I could be proud of. And that, I realized, was a gift far greater than any inheritance they could have received. A year had passed since the will was read, and the dust of the Kansas plains was no longer a bittersweet taste of memory and loss, but a sweet, satisfying one of hard-won victory. The Miller farm, as it was once known, was now two separate entities, two vastly different destinies. Mark and Susan had eventually sold their land for a fraction of its original value, a final act of defeat. The buyer, a real estate developer, planned to turn it into a sprawling housing community, a fate that would wipe away every trace of the history my family had built there. They had moved to the city, their lives a distant memory to the community, their names spoken only in hushed tones of pity. I hadn't heard from them since, and in a way I was okay with that. The Golden Pasture, now part of a thriving, expanding farm, was my world, my sanctuary. I had bought the neighboring plot of land and was expanding my operations, a testament to the success I had achieved. My success wasn't just my own. It was a testament to the community that had supported me, to the workers who toiled beside me, and, most importantly, to the quiet, determined love of my father. I stood on the porch of the old farmhouse, the scent of fresh rain and damp earth filling the air. The house was finally mine, a place of peace, not of conflict. I walked inside, a single photo on the mantelpiece catching my eye. It was a picture of my father, his face weathered by the sun and his eyes filled with a quiet strength that I now understood. He was smiling. In his own way, he had given me everything. He hadn't given me a dime. He had given me something far more valuable, a foundation of hard work, a testament to my own worth, and a piece of land that was more than just property. It was home. It was a legacy. And I knew that with every crop I harvested, with every day I spent on this land, I was honoring the man who, in his quiet wisdom, had taught me what it truly meant to be a miller. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more amazing content. We appreciate your support.